Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I walk to the library. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago, and I'm on my way to the library. We've got lots going on today, and I need to get out and have a little exercise before I do it, so hence the walk. Well, I thought I'd talk to you today about a couple things that have happened in my gaming life that I think are interesting and maybe worth exploring a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do. So the first one I mentioned on the Top of the Stack episode last time, this first incident that sort of sparked this episode for today, was the incident with the game Revive. Now, if you haven't listened to that episode, you should. It's a banger. But even if you don't want to, I'll summarize quickly. I have this game Revive that I got at Gen Con, and I'm really excited to try it. I arranged to play a game at my game club, but through a sort of combination of not really paying attention as well as I should have and other things, I inadvertently invited too many people to join us for the game. So instead of myself and 3 others, I invited myself and 4 others. Well, the game only plays 4. So I set up the game, taught the other 4 people how to play, and then stepped away while they played the game. I did not get to play it. So that's one thing to think about that happened. And then the other one happened last night. I actually run two board game clubs. One of them I run with my design partner, Rob, and that's Toggle Gaming. The other one I run by myself is much smaller. It meets every other week at my school. That's the Columbia College Chicago Board Game Society, which is just a few people who meet and play games every other week. We met for the first time this semester, this week. We had 2 returning members and 2 new members, so a total of 4. We had 3 returning members and 2 new members, so a total of 5 students came to the meeting. Then there was me. Hopefully there'll be a bit more promotion before the next one, and we'll see the numbers go up a bit, but whatever. In pursuit of that, at the beginning of the night, we were playing Quicks, waiting for the other members to show up and just kind of getting started with a short game so that if other people came, they'd be able to join in. And one of the new people who showed up was a freshman. Actually, they were walking by and I said, "Are you here to play board games?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, do you want to play board games?" And they said, "Sure." And so they put their bags down and joined us and ended up staying the whole evening. At the end of the evening, I said, "I'm so glad you wandered by. I hope you'll come back." And they said, "Me too." I came here to do homework, but I didn't get that done. And we all laughed at that. But anyhow, while we were playing that first game of Quicks, we were about a third of the way in when this other student joined us, and I realized it was going to be a little while. So then I said, "Hey, do you want to just take my sheet so that you can play?" And they said, "Sure." And so that's what they did, which worked out just fine. So both of these things involve me setting aside my gaming play in order to let someone else play. And I wanted to think about that in the context of particularly this board game class that I teach, which is about building community, to think a little bit about what it means to me to host games and to try to welcome other people into the gaming hobby and to build the hobby with them. So I have like five things that I think are important in that regard. The first one is, as I was saying, as is kind of evident from this other thing, is comfort and fun for others. So in both of the examples I just gave here, I put the comfort and fun that other people were having ahead of my own, with the idea that cultivating this game experience for them is a reward in itself. And to a degree that's true, but certainly in terms of trying to make a welcoming space, that's necessary. And I think you'll hear this from most people who do some sort of board game club elements. If part of their goal is to make a welcoming community for people who might play with them, the way that they often approach that is to put the needs of the group ahead of their own needs. And that shouldn't be surprising for anyone doing some hosting, right? It involves some self-sacrifice on some level. And that often manifests at our game groups with things like the hosts making an effort much of the time to not get involved in too many deep, complicated games, or have as a kind of standing rule that if new people show up, we step away from the game to go say hello to those new people. So if you play a game with me at Toggle Gaming, part of what might happen is I'll step away for a few minutes to go say hi to new people if they come in. And the result of that is that when new people come in, they're not there for more than a minute or two before one of us comes up and says hello and welcomes them to the club. And often we'll try to get them into a game unless it seems like they just want to play a game with their group. So extending the warm hand of greeting. I will say, Rob has mentioned a couple times, and I feel like I agree with him, that much of the community aspect of how we run Toggle Gaming is not dissimilar from a church, in that it is a ceremonial and regular gathering place where people connect with one another to do social activities, and as such, it serves a lot of that same communal feeling, if not the religious and or spiritual feeling. Though there's an argument that playing games has a spiritual or at least community component to it. So, comfort and fun for others first. Second part of being a host for me is aiming for high rules clarity and strict rules interpretation for myself. So when I'm teaching people a game, particularly if it's a game I know pretty well, I will do my best to explain the game in a way that helps them understand the rules, but also some of the consequences of the rules. I don't do that too much, but if there are like glaring traps that can ruin your game, I do like to mention that as a thing. The result of that is, of course, that if it's done well, everybody understands how the game works and they're able to play pretty well. Part of your job when you're a host in that way is also to keep an eye on the rules and make sure that people understand what the rules are, particularly if they're doing something that's about to break the rules, or more likely that reflects a rule later that there's going to be a problem. You know, like if they're putting a thing down and doing that will block off something else, you at least want to just make sure they understand, like, don't forget, you can't put two numbers next to each other. So, like in Sagrada, if somebody goes to put a 3 next to a spot that has a 3 written on it, you know, putting out like, you know, if you do that, you're not going to be able to fill that 3 in, or just don't forget. And a lot of that depends on reading the group. If you have somebody who is a pretty strong gamer, I might not point that out. But if it's their first game, I still might. But then I also have generally, especially if I'm teaching a game or playing a game with people who have played it less than me, I have very strict rules for myself. So if I've broken a rule, or I forget a rule, or I make a play and it was dumb, I'm less like, no, I'm not backing it up. That was a dumb play, but that's what I get. In part, that keeps the game moving quickly, and I just feel like it makes the game, again, feel more welcoming or accommodating for people, because they see like I'm doing my best to make it a fair and fun experience for them. That doesn't mean that I don't forget rules, especially on the first game that I teach. It's not uncommon for me to remember a rule later. Now, if it's affected gameplay, generally what I say is, let's play it the way I taught it, unless everybody wants to change right now. Depending on the group you're with, people do or don't want to change. I'd say most of the people I play with Toggle, they want to play a rules as written. So if we remember a rule partway through, we just switch and play by the rule, unless it's given someone a huge advantage to do so. Well, my third entry is welcoming to new folks. I think I've already talked about that a little bit. The idea that if you're hosting an event or running an event, you want to keep your eye out for people who are new. So if you have a bigger event like our Toggle, people will come in, and if I don't recognize them, I'll go say hi. Sometimes I say, have you been to Toggle before? Because often they have. Sometimes they haven't been there for years. Sometimes they've been there a couple times and I just haven't met them. But being able to sort of greet somebody when they come in is a really great part of making your community feel welcoming, and something I'm glad to do. The next one I wanted to point out is something that it's hard to discuss exactly, but it's aiming for group appropriate games. And this again goes a little bit to comfort for others before myself. Often what happens for me is that I will choose what game we're going to play based on the group we have and their level of interest and or ability. So there's a variety of different games that can come up, but part of what I like about playing these different games is trying to cultivate different groups and get different kinds of gameplay in. With my game club at Columbia, we tend to play a lot more light or party games, stuff that's not too hard to learn, but that we can play quickly, in part because then if new people show up, we're not playing a game that's going to take a ton of time. But also because depending on the group, we often want to be able to be pretty big. My goal with that group is to get it to a regular number of people that's big enough that people often break off into 2 or 3 different smaller groups playing games rather than always being one big group. In part because, if you get up to 6 or 7, it really limits what you can play. And part of why I wanted to have that group is to have another chance to play Euro games. And thus far, that is not the result. But that's okay. I really enjoy doing it anyway. Often, again, that means choosing games that fit for the group or fit for the people at the table and not choosing games for yourself necessarily. It'll also mean considering accommodation issues for the people at the table. If you have somebody who's not got great eyesight, you want to think about where are they sitting compared to the board. Are you playing a game by Portal Games where the font is really small? If you got somebody with color blindness, are you making sure that the game is colorblind accessible? Are you communicating things in a way that make it clear what's going on maybe for people who are new? So all of those things go into helping choose the right game for the right group. And now here's the last one, and this is something that I started doing once it was clear that Rob and I were going to run Toggl, which is that you also need to make room for yourself and your own gaming needs. Part of what I like about going to Toggl is that it gives me a chance to play some of those heavier, crunchier games that I really don't get to play basically anywhere else in my gaming life. My wife likes some crunchy Euros, but not a lot of them, and a lot of the ones that I really like aren't up her alley, which means that I have very limited time and space to play those games. Now, if I were to let the hosting part of my experience at Toggl be the predominant experience that I have at Toggl, I could see myself getting burned out on doing it because the original reason that I liked going there, i.e. playing these really heavy games that I don't get to play anywhere else, I'm not getting to do that. So instead, I make sure at least once a month, if not twice, to have a week where I plan ahead and play something big and beefy and sort of fits that thing that I like to do at that part of the club. That's part of what keeps me enthused about it, and part of what provides that rewards for me is the opportunity to play these games that I don't get to play otherwise. And I'm really pleased to have that connection and that outlet, and making time for myself to do that, and sometimes feels a little selfish, but at the same time you have to recognize the old adage about airplanes, right? You have to put oxygen on yourself before you help other passengers. And if I can't stay committed and interested in the game club because I'm enjoying it and because it does what I need it to do, then it's hard for me to have enthusiasm about helping it do what others want it to do. So those are my thoughts on hosting game clubs. What are your thoughts on hosting game clubs? Have you done so? If you have ideas about that or thoughts about it, please head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your thoughts there. I'd love to hear what you do to cultivate the game community in your game clubs, what you do to build them and grow them, and where your attention lies when you're showing people games, but also how do you attend to your own needs, and what do you do for yourself as a gamer. Well, thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.